President Biden's foreign corruption scandal gets ignored by the mainstream media. Meanwhile, they praise his speech at Howard University, where he said that white supremacy is the biggest terrorist threat to the United States. This is President Biden Day, I guess, on Julie Noted. This is the noteworthy news that you need to know for today, Wednesday, May 17th, 2023. But first, please hit the subscribe button down below so you can get a notification anytime I'm talking about news or timeless topics. And be sure to follow me at Julie R. Hartman on Instagram and Twitter. All right, on to the first news story of today. I have to claim some responsibility for not reporting on this sooner. Biden has had a huge corruption scandal that has been exposed by the House Republicans, which have subpoenaed his bank records. And it's been just amazing to see how little the mainstream media has been reporting on it. I woke up this morning and I went, wait a minute, this happened just a few days ago, but there's been enough time that has passed for people to be reporting on it in its entirety. So from now on, I am going to be covering this very consistently because when other people aren't covering it, you can count on me to do it here. The Biden family and their associates allegedly made tens of millions of dollars both during and after Biden's time as vice president, and they used over 20 shell companies to do business with some of our foreign adversaries. So what are these 20 shell companies? They were LLCs that were created during Biden's time as vice president, and they were run mostly by his son, Hunter Biden, and Hunter Biden's business associates. Basically, what it means to be a shell company is that these companies don't do anything except for collect money. But they're a front to look like they are doing business, but instead they are doing shady operations behind the scene. On this show today, we really should have a shade-o-meter and talk about what level of shady some of these business dealings go to, because anyone with just basic common sense would be able to read about this and learn about this and see that it is just a trail indicating Biden's corruption. But as I said, it has been yawned at by the mainstream media. I'll give you an example. The New Republic ran a story a few days ago when this came out saying Republicans finally admit that they have no incriminating evidence on Joe Biden. The New York Times echoed this in a similar headline. They ran a piece called House Republican Report Finds No Evidence of Wrongdoing by President Biden. I'm going to get into some of the really just shabby arguments that the New York Times makes in order to say that there is, quote, no evidence. But first, let's go through some of this. And let's see if you think this may or may not be some evidence of corruption or wrongdoing. Okay, so I mentioned that there are these 20 shell companies. First of all, why do you need to create 20 shell companies during your time as VP? Now, people are going to say President Biden or then VP Biden didn't create them, his son did. Why does his son need 20 different companies? Again, if we had a shade-o-meter, that would be going all the way to the other side. That is very weird to have 20 in just a span of 8 years, okay? According to these bank records, these 20 shell companies took in at least $10 million by firms run by Chinese and Romanian nationals. That money was then doled out to members of the Biden family, such as the son, Hunter Biden, President Biden's brother, James Biden, his daughter-in-law and the widow of Beau Biden, named Haley Biden, Hunter's current wife, Melissa something or other, and his meaning President Biden's granddaughters, okay? One of these companies, Robinson Walker LLC, was run by Hunter Biden and a former Clinton administration official, Rob Walker. One of those companies was linked to Hunter's now defunct investment management firm called Rosemont Seneca Partners. That's just one of the LLCs that was jointly administered by a former Clinton administrator. There was also Owasco LLC, Hudson West III LLC, Rosemont Seneca Bohai LLC. I mean, if this weren't talking about our country and potentially our foreign security, what am I trying to say? National security. It would be comical. It would be truly comical to read these names, but because it is so serious, it isn't comical. It is truly sick. There is a Beijing-backed company called the CEFC. It's a China energy company that's connected to State Energy HK Limited. By the way, it is truly redundant to say that a Chinese energy company is linked to the CCP or is a state-backed enterprise, because everything in China is linked to the CCP. Literally everything. Every school, every company, every shop selling just about anything, it is all controlled and managed by the CCP. So it is impossible to do business with a Chinese national or a Chinese company without the oversight of the CCP. But nevertheless, there is this Beijing-backed, again redundant, CEFC China Energy Company. Ready for this? It paid $3 million to Robinson Walker, that LLC of Hunter Biden and Rob Walker. $800,000 of that $3 million went to Rob Walker himself. $600,000 went to Hunter. $300,000 went to James Biden. And $25,000 went to Haley Biden, which is, again, Beau Biden's widowed wife. Talk about a shadometer going all the way to one side. Sean, do you find this to be just a little bit shady? Or do you think the New Republic is right, that the Republicans finally admit they have no incriminating evidence on Joe Biden? May this constitute just a little bit incriminating evidence? China paying millions of dollars and then this money going to the ex-wife of Beau Biden? I mean, why does that woman need to get money? It's all just a shady family business foreign operation. Sean is about to weigh in. Yes, Sean. It's not a joke, man. It's not a joke, man. I didn't do business with China. He always whispers. It's so bizarre. Oh, speaking of which, literally next on my notes, in a 2020 presidential debate, President Biden said, "My son has not made money in terms of this thing about," what are we talking about? So apt, President Biden said that. What are we talking about? China. He said at the second and final debate with Donald Trump on October 22nd, 2020, "The only guy who made money from China," he said, "is this guy, Trump." This was him yelling at a debate. He's the only one. Nobody else has made money from China. Oh, yes, not his daughter-in-law, not his granddaughters, not his son, not his brother. Nobody else has made money from China except for Trump. This guy lies with the ease with which he breathes. We're going to get to this more with this speech that he gave to a historically black college and university, Howard University. He was the commencement speaker. He just lied, totally lied about white supremacy in order to pander to them and in order to increase his popularity and get more votes. This guy constantly lies. It's his modus operandi. He doesn't have any principles. His principle is to do in the moment whatever would be advantageous for him politically. So yes, he has been denying all of this shady business dealings. That was just pertaining to China. Shall we go on? We know, thanks to the Hunter Biden laptop story, which was another lie, President Biden said that that story was fake. 51 intelligence officials signed a letter saying that it was Russian disinformation. Yet another lie sold to the American public. It turns out that that laptop was totally authentic. It just took the mainstream media 2 years to finally cough up and admit that it was authentic. We know from that story that Hunter Biden, President Biden's son, sat on the board of a Ukrainian natural gas company called Burisma. This was during the time that then Vice President Biden was head of American-Ukrainian relations, okay? Shady. But we also know that this company, Burisma, paid $1 million annually to Hunter Biden to serve on the board. By the way, according to Fortune 500, the average salary for a board member of the top Fortune 500 companies in the United States is $85,000 a year. Hunter Biden was getting $1 million paycheck to sit on the board of this Ukrainian company. That's another tick up on the shadometer. Not only that he's on this Ukrainian company while his father's head of Ukraine policy, but that he's getting a really outsized, huge sum in order to serve. Hunter made $1 million, but then his salary was cut in half once President Biden left office. That is a new thing that has been exposed amid this corruption scandal. Again, really shady. So he's paid a lot while his dad has influence. And then the second his dad doesn't have any more influence, his salary goes down. But again, the New York Times says there's no evidence of any wrongdoing. Shall I continue? Sean. He couldn't find a way to pay child support. Yes, Hunter Biden couldn't even find a way to pay child support with all of this. By the way, I just want to take a pause. One of the things that I have learned through my time in broadcasting And some of the biggest pieces of advice that I've gotten is to not get angry on the air. I will not lie to you, it is difficult not to get angry right now. There are some times, though, where anger is warranted. Obviously, we shouldn't curse. I'm not in the business of yelling at a camera. But one of the things that is sad is that we seem, as a country, to have lost the ability to respond appropriately when things like this happen to us. Think about all of the lies that have been funneled at the American people, one after the other, over the past few years. That Donald Trump colluded with Russia, that the COVID virus came from a bat in a wet market in China. Then once it was found out that it came from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, we relied that the United States didn't fund this Wuhan lab of virology. It turns out that we did fund it, that nothing shady happened in the 2020 election. That's another lie that was sold to us. I'm not saying the 2020 election was stolen, but I think we could all recognize that when there's video of ballots being pulled out under a desk at the State Farm Arena in Georgia, once ballot counters were told to go home, that constitutes some malpractice or maldoing. All of these lies have just been funneled and pummeled at us. And because we are so bombarded, we don't react very well to them. And so when something like this comes out, where it is proven that the Biden family, the family that is in office right now, is basically being paid off by our adversaries, and that our president lied about it, well, damn it, we have the right to be angry. And frankly, I think it is shirking our responsibilities as Americans if we're not angry about it. The final example I'll give you is pertaining to Romania. So we have corruption with regard to China, corruption with regard to Ukraine. Another thing that has come out is with Romania, okay? $1 million. It really is astounding that Hunter couldn't pay child support with all this money. Another payment of $1 million went from an Eastern European business tycoon in Romania. His name is Gabriel Popovicuio. He actually paid $3 million from Blandin Enterprise Limited. That was his company. He is a very corrupt Romanian businessman, and he paid that between November of 2015 and May of 2017 through Rob Walker's LLC, which was jointly administered by Rob Walker and Hunter Biden. And some of that money went to Hunter, Haley, and another unnamed Biden family member. So let's now look at what the New York Times argued. I've mentioned several times that the headline is House Republican Report Finds No Evidence of Wrongdoing by President Biden. I read this article thinking, how could they, in their good mind, argue this? I mean, how can you say that there is no evidence? Even if their title of the article had been limited evidence, that is still a lie. But to say that there is no evidence is truly a blatant outright lie, okay? I'm going to give you an example of one of the ways that they argued away what has been exposed here. So this New York Times article is talking about how Hunter Biden cultivated a business relationship with Ye Jianmin. Some of you may recognize this name. For those who watch my show, I talk about this person a lot on Julie Noted. He is the founder of that CEFC Chinese energy company that paid the Biden family. In 2017, this came out during the Hunter Biden laptop scandal, Mr. Ye gave Hunter Biden a 2.8 carat diamond ring, thanking him for the meeting that they had. So the New York Times writes about this. They acknowledge that Hunter Biden got a 2.8 carat diamond, okay? Then they quote Hunter Biden. They say, Hunter Biden writes, says, and then the New York Times writes, "What would they be bribing me for? My dad wasn't in office." It's a quote from Hunter Biden. Then the New York Times goes on to say, representatives of Hunter Biden characterized his business offerings at the time as providing legal and consulting services. As if that supports the argument that there's no evidence for any wrongdoing. That's not journalistic integrity. What the New York Times is saying is somebody said, i.e. representatives of Hunter Biden, totally unbiased, representatives of Hunter Biden are saying that these were merely legal and consulting services. It's amazing that they just cite that one thing as their evidence, that there is no evidence of any wrongdoing. Then the New York Times tries to give this mealy-mouthed justification of Hunter Biden's shady business dealings by saying that he was going through a really tough time in his life. This is a paragraph from the Times article. The payments came at a time when Hunter Biden's life and finances were spiraling amid his drug addiction and after the death of his brother Beau Biden from brain cancer. Hunter Biden had begun a romantic relationship with his brother's widow. Again, also shady, weird. His business partner, Mr. Walker, and Uncle James Biden were pursuing international business work. Abby Lowell, a lawyer for Hunter Biden, said in a statement that House Republicans revealed nothing new in their report. This is the statement. Today's so-called revelations are repackaged misstatements of perfectly proper meetings and business by private citizens. That is the New York Times argument. They are quoting people close to Hunter Biden who say that there is nothing wrong to use as their evidence. This isn't an opinion piece. This is a straight news article. They are using that as their evidence to say that Hunter Biden did nothing wrong. If this isn't a reason to not trust the New York Times, I don't know what is. And to close out this story, I will just read a quote that President Biden, or then Vice President Biden, he was giving a speech in Romania in 2014, shortly before his son Hunter received $3 million from a corrupt Romanian official. This is what he said to the crowd. Corruption is a cancer that eats away at a citizen's faith in democracy. Corruption is another form of tyranny. Moving on to the second Biden story of today, which fits very much actually with this first story about corruption. President Biden was recently the commencement speaker at Howard University, a all-black university in Washington, D.C. It is an HBCU, or historically black college and university. Shanzi, my dear producer, said that the entire speech was ridiculous. I did not have the time or stomach to watch that entire speech. But I did see a clip in which he said that white supremacy is the number one biggest terrorist threat, that's right, terrorist threat, to the United States. Let's listen to this segment.
Battle. It's never really over. But on the best days, enough of us have the guts and the hearts to stand up for the best in us. The most dangerous terrorist threat to our homeland is white supremacy.
Sean just told me that they gave him an honorary degree. Also, another part that's not in this clip, but I saw in a subsequent clip, is that when he said that white supremacy is the biggest terrorist, was that in the clip, by the way? Did he say that? Oh, Sean talked over it. Just so you know, viewers, it's his fault. I was paying attention. Just kidding. After he said that white supremacy is the biggest terrorist threat to the United States, he actually said, I wish I had included this in the clip. He goes, and I'm not just saying that because I'm at an HBCU. I say that everywhere I go. That is so funny. He's basically saying, I'm not pandering to you because you're black. He's essentially admitting exactly what he is doing. Look, we can laugh about it, and of course, in some way, it's so ridiculous that it is worth laughing about. But really what this is a lie. It's a lie that is undermining the fabric of our country. If you look back at the 1950s and 1960s in America, white supremacy was a problem. I mean, the Jim Crow South was an awful place. Segregation was real. Mistreatment of black Americans was real. Since then, we have done a remarkable job to try to rectify those wrongs, in large part thanks to great figures such as Martin Luther King, other great black figures such as Clarence Thomas, Thomas Sowell, Larry Elder, Candace Owens. And if you look at the remarkable achievement of having pretty good race relations in the United States, that's something that we should be proud of. But now what we are seeing over the past few years is Democrats like Joe Biden trying to concoct this narrative that white supremacy is a terrorist threat to the United States in order to sow the seeds of division, create racial animus so that they can paint their party or their administration or their campaign as the saviors of the racial wrongdoing. There is just no evidence, no credible evidence that white supremacy is the number one terrorist threat to the United States. Now, President Biden would cite that apparently this past weekend there was some white supremacy group or super right-wing pro-America group that marched in front of the Washington Memorial in Washington, D.C. I saw footage of that. I didn't even recognize the name of the group. There looked to be no more than about 20 people. Of course, there are crazy fringe movement people. They exist everywhere, not just in the United States. They exist all over the world. But are we really going to say that that fringe group it represents a large movement that is a terrorist threat to the most powerful country in the world, a country which has 340 million people in their population. Really? Also, if you look at what happened in 2020 with the horrible death of George Floyd and the crusade against police and law enforcement that came after, there really was not any strong evidence that police brutality is rampant, especially against Black Americans. Of course, what happened to George Floyd was awful, horrible. But in the year before 2020, only 12 unarmed Blacks were killed by police. Of course, that number should be 0. But my gosh, given how many police encounters there are a year, that is really a remarkably low number. You were more likely to get struck by lightning in 2019 than to be an unarmed Black killed by police. That is true almost every year. Some years it's 20 unarmed Blacks killed by police, some years it's as low as 9. But again, we are talking about single or double-digit numbers. People think that this is so rampant, and it is not. So when President Biden gets up there and spreads these lies, it really is undermining the fabric of this country. And what we have right now is that we have an American elite which knowingly, repeatedly lies in order to personally and professionally advantage themselves. If President Biden really cared about America, he would be talking about how much progress we made. He would be talking about how all Americans have good reason to trust the police, have good reason to trust the justice system. He wouldn't be trying to divide people in this way. Similarly, if the New York Times really cared about the United States, they would be honest that President Biden and his family has been implicated in a large-scale corruption scandal. They wouldn't be trying to explain that away. But the reason why they lie is because it personally and professionally advantages them. The writers at the New York Times keep their positions, President Biden gets more votes, and we're seeing it at all levels. Even if you look at administrators at schools all over the country, elementary school, high schools, who write these mealy-mouthed emails about how women's rights are under attack and voting rights are under attack, and we need to create a next generation of young Americans who support democracy. They know that this stuff isn't happening. They know that there is really not a large-scale threat against women or against our right to vote. But they repeat these lies because they know that is what is required to maintain their position. It is actually kind of a lefty argument that I'm about to make, though I shouldn't even call it a lefty argument because it's just a basic decency argument. But the elite, when you are in a position of power, you have a responsibility to use that well. That's what the left always says. Privilege, privilege, power, power, you have to use it well. What we are seeing right now is our American elite abuse it and being complicit in the undermining of this country. And President Biden is the person who should be held the most accountable. He is at the tippity top of our country, and he is offender number 1 in this category. On that happy note, I'm sorry to regale you with bad news, but it's all stuff that we do need to know about, especially because the media is not reporting on these things. Thank you very much for joining me today. Please follow me at Julie R. Hartman on Instagram and Twitter, and stay tuned here for more news every day. Take care.